why tonight's game against Baylor is absolutely a must-win. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you who are listening and making this podcast grow at an unprecedented rate. And it's because of fans like you who value this great UConn content that we're super proud to say that we're the only daily podcast covering both the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, the absolute basketball capital of the world. We're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games like tonight's game against Baylor. And we're also making monthly donations to Bleeding Blue for Good, supporting NIL initiatives that make a difference. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Special shout out to my everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, tonight's game against Baylor is at the crosshairs, and there's a lot to unpack. Two things 100% can be true at once. Does Dan Hurley need to watch himself closely in this game with officials if they make a horrendous call? Yes. Do I think his behavior has cost UConn any games or a game against Memphis this year? No. I think the officiating did. He reacted to it. But here's the thing, and I think some of you might see this as a stark difference to my stance on Danny and recent episodes. I tell my kids all the time, you can't control everything in life, but you can control how you react to it and how you respond. So if you want to knock Danny for his reaction to adversity, call him a baby, whatever, that's fine. I'll accept that. But I won't accept what is ongoing, which is this tear me down narrative that people are still peddling almost a week later. Because tonight against Baylor, there's a very high likelihood he's going to face a very familiar test in standing across not Scott Drew, the Baylor coach, who's also on his way to being a Hall of Famer, but our old friend James Breeding, who just did the Providence game against BYU. He's an official who famously tossed Danny for pumping up the crowd against Villanova in the XL Center. So James Breeding is no stranger to making himself part of the story. He's not afraid to throw out technical fouls, and he's certainly not afraid of Dan Hurley. They have a history. That brings me to this media narrative that the Big East officials are somehow intimidated by Hurley. I don't know about any of you, but when you look at guys that have officiated games, and having been someone that's been on the sidelines that literally has covered games closely, not just from TV. I know that I'm doing that more so now, but I've watched guys like James Breeding, Robert Ayers, Teddy Valentine, better known as TV Teddy, or even Carl Hess. I mean, the last guy, Carl Hess, was a famous official. There's pictures of him and Jim Calhoun that go back to the early 90s, and he's been officiating forever. He eventually got a job in the ACC. They fired him for saying some racist stuff. And once Hess got himself into the SoCon, which is desperate for quality officials, they'll bypass a few racial comments from here and there. There was a game in Johnson City where Carl Hess literally almost stepped all the way up. He literally ran at former Kentucky star Scott Padgett. Yes, the same Scott Padgett who was on that, I think it was the 96 championship team. He was coaching in the SoCon. But imagine that. Carl Hess, all 5'10", 200 pounds, probably 65 years old, literally sprinting up to a 6'9", 280-pound Scott Padgett. These refs aren't afraid of people. They are not afraid of Dan Hurley. So, and they're not backing down. So, I mean, do you guys know who Teddy Valentine is? His nickname is TV Teddy for a reason. He wants to be on TV. He's been demonstrative. No nonsense. He'd tee up Danny in 30 seconds if he got a game for him. So, look, good officials, bad officials. If you think after Maui, the reflection wasn't really just about media types saying that he's embarrassing or, anything like that. Danny seems to be rethinking his approach internally, not from any pressure from anybody else, but because officials aren't scared of what's going on. They've gotten their pound of flesh. This team needs to be a different kind of team. And in order for Danny to get that, he needs to be a different kind of leader. And I think we saw that in the Maryland Eastern Shores game. Was it high pressure? No, because they were up by, 50, 60 points. But he did slam a clipboard at the end of that game when the guys did something different. But he wasn't doing it towards the official. He was talking about the kids, right? In the past 2 seasons, Danny has been able to kind of afford to rant and rave about calls because he's had these teams that play a brand of bulletproof basketball, as he calls it. This year, not so much. This team may have as much raw talent as those other teams, but they lack the basketball IQ and acumen that we're so used to, the cohesion of the past few squads, at least for now. And that's where the focus needs to be tonight. Hurley doesn't need to dominate the narrative. He needs to coach his team. The group is still figuring out who they are. And that process has become even harder now, again, without Alex Karaban for a second straight game. Alex isn't just the smartest player on the court. He's their best shooter, arguably the heart and soul of this team. His absence will be felt tremendously. And Hurley knows he can't afford distractions. On the flip side, with Baylor, they might be without their star freshman, VJ Edgecombe, who's dealing with a nagging hamstring injury. Even if he does suit up, which is likely to happen, don't expect him to be the high-flying version of himself we've seen before, or even what was expected of him. The levels, that kind of levels the playing field just a little bit. But it doesn't mean this will make it any less of a must-win for UConn. I'll repeat, the season isn't over if we lose to Baylor tonight, but it sure doesn't quiet the noise. We must win tonight. It's pivotal on so many levels. One, psychologically. They need to get the bad taste of Maui out of their mouths. They need to stop. They need to beat a team that isn't ranked in the 300s. They haven't beaten a high major opponent yet. And while they're still clinging to their AP ranking, that goodwill will not last forever. If they lose to Baylor, they're going to be so far out of the AP rankings. I know Baylor's 15th, but I don't think anyone thinks that Baylor is, the end-all be-all. And this is somehow a dominating win, or a win that would dominate the headlines. The only thing this will do tonight is quiet the noise of the media that they finally beat a non-low major team. 2, relax the fans a little bit. I know I've been a little bit irritable lately. I apologize if you feel like some of my content has been snarkier, but I think part of that is because I'm trying to fight off people from picking at our team, which, by the way, has been the standard over the last 2 years and has been running college basketball for a very long time. But most importantly, this game is about finding out who this team is and what they're capable of. It's about proving to themselves and to the rest of college basketball that they compete at the highest level, even without Alex Karaban. When we return, I want to talk about something that I see with this team, and also how are we going to beat Baylor tonight? All coming up after the break. Hate your season-long fantasy team? Want to stay in the action? Meet Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs. Play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats. Strategize with your partner and climb the leaderboard together. It's daily fantasy like you've never seen before, because sports are better with friends. Download Better Together now and join the social fantasy movement. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. I don't know if we have any storytellers out there, but if we do, I'm sure you're familiar with something that's called the hero's journey. If you're unfamiliar, Joseph Campbell's A Hero with 1,000 Faces outlines the classic hero's journey, a narrative structure that applies to every great story, probably anything that you've ever watched, any great movie. With a hero and a nemesis, follows this structure from Karate Kid to Star Wars to Back to the Future. With sports, it can be correlative as well. And it starts with something called the departure. The hero leaves their ordinary world to embark on an adventure. For me, UConn, that adventure began in Maui. They leave the friendly confines of stores, fly to the distant land in Maui where they got absolutely destroyed, punched in the mouth, and realized, wow, there's a lot more work to be done. Second, initiation. The hero faces challenges, grows, transforms. This is the phase UConn is in now. They're dealing with adversity. Their leader is hurt and concussed, not available to play. Their coach under attack from media and other fan bases. And they're finding out probably internally who's fully bought in. Are some guys 1 foot out the door looking at that transfer portal, or is everyone lockstep and ready to rock? And they're really kind of figuring out what kind of team they want to be. And third, and hopefully the best part, is the return. The hero comes back to their ordinary world where they're with newfound wisdom or power. For UConn, this will be what conference play in the NCAA tournament will be. The question is, what will they learn along the way? This team's journey is still in these middle stages. The departure is over. The initiation is underway. Now it's about meeting these challenges head on and growing stronger in the process. And I, for one, feel like adversity breeds resilience. This is a team with a talent that could go very far, but talent alone isn't enough. And I know Dan knows that. It's how you respond to these tough times that defines you. And Hurley knows this probably better than anyone. He's lived it. Tonight is about more than just getting a win against Baylor. It's about setting the tone for opportunity games the rest of this season, because there's not going to be a ton of them. Even though the Big East started off hot, and we're going to talk about that in the third segment against the Big East Big 12 challenge, can't really take away what they've done early in the year and how some of these games aren't going to be quad one games. So there'll be no Alex Karaban tonight, maybe no fully healthy VJ Edgecombe for Baylor. Both teams are dealing with their own challenges, but great teams and great leaders rise above them. Hurley will be tested tonight, not just by Baylor, but by the narrative swirling around him. Let's see how he blocks that out and just focuses on his team. The question is how he and his team will respond. That's the story we'll be watching unfold tonight. And for one, I can't wait to see what happens. And I'm excited for, we're sending someone to the game. Just got him scored away with tickets. But so have a great time, Trevor. Enjoy it. Wear white. But tonight's game against Baylor isn't just about getting back on track. It's rediscovering some identity, right? They need to do a few different things. Karaban's absence creates a big void, both on the court and in the locker room. Having that constant person. I know he's gonna be on the bench, like he's like, in a skybox somewhere. But I think, Coach AK and then Coach Dan Hurley emphasized the absence of such a cornerstone player presents an opportunity for others to step up and announce themselves to the college basketball world. So what are we going to do without this 15.9 points per game in elite three-point shooting? The Huskies need offensive production from other sources, right? So we have Solo and Liam are the two most likely candidates to fill that gap. But their performances so far have been, I would say, inconsistent. I think Solo has been the most consistent offensive threat. He's been in that 13, 14 points throughout so far in the 8 games. But McNeely, I think, is really kind of what needs to happen for this team. Yeah, Liam is to me is the key to this, because I think Solo is going to get his shots, his like, that 15.9 points that Alex is. I think Solo will cover that. I think we're going to get 16 points from Solo. I think McNeely, though, he said he had 16 points against Maryland Eastern Shores. It looked like he was hunting his shot a little more. He kind of looked like he was in the Cam Spencer role, right? By the way, shout out to Cam, 51 points in the G League. Wow. But I think Liam needs to use his size and physicality to get to the basket, because he's not a burner. He's not going to blow by anybody, but he needs to use angles and use the system and the screens to essentially get easy buckets, and also to provide opportunities for other players when they swarm to him. So, Hurley also hinted in his sorry guys, just had a crazy indigestion there. But also Hurley hinted at tactical adjustments in his media availability. He'll focus on running plays through Liam and Solo, or then we're going to lean on bigs like Terrace and Sampson and also Jalen Stewart in isolation against Baylor's smaller lineups. These strategic options are what the cat and mouse game of this game is going to be. I think it's going to be a close game because we're like this close to each other. 23 and 24 in Ken Palm, two of the most offensive efficient teams in the country. They really need to contain Baylor's dribble drives. UConn's defensive struggles in Maui were absolutely glaring, but opposing guards repeatedly blew past defenders, leading to minus 50 free throw attempts in 3 games. This simply is unacceptable. So whether it's the refs or whether it's the defense or whether it's both, either way, they can't let Jeremy Roach and others like Langston Love blow by them. Hurley was candid about the team's defensive shortcomings in his media availability, citing issues with fouling and physical mismatches. We're making a lot of mistakes defensively, he said. We've got to clean up the details and be better at what we do. Tonight, the onus will fall on players like Haas, Jaden Ross, and Solo Ball to prevent Baylor guards from penetrating and creating chaos in the lane. Discipline and effort will be the key to limiting Baylor's trips to the free throw line and controlling the game's tempo. That's a very interesting quote from Dan, because if you noticed, earlier in the year, he was always mentioning guys like Aiden Mahaney. He's not mentioning him anymore. And I'm sad for Aiden, but I'm also, listen, it's a business right now. And I hope he's going to give them some quality minutes off the bench. But if you notice, this is what Dan is already saying, like, he's kind of lost favor, in my opinion, right? I don't know that to be true, but we're kind of seeing it unfold before our eyes. Also, we talked about him in the pod yesterday. Norchad Ormir, Baylor guards are a handful, but the senior big man from Nicaragua has been a double-double machine throughout his college career. Played against him in the Final Four. Amir presents a daunting challenge for UConn just because of his quickness and his ability and his craftiness around the basket. He's a below the rim player. He's not going to grab a rebound and go up and jam it on your head. He's the type of guy that's going to pump fake you. You're going to get a foul and you're going to get an and one. So this is a difficult matchup. I think Johnson is likely to get into foul trouble. So I think Terrace is going to play a bigger role in this. So I don't know why we're still doing the Samson Johnson stuff in terms of starting, but I've had some time to think about it. I don't know. I still can't come up with viable reasons. And I heard Dan say, it's different from a fan to look at things from kind of like the stats perspective, right? Or the efficiency ratings. And then to actually acknowledge that they're seeing some different things from a coaching perspective, like what Terrace could be versus what he is. And I don't disagree with that. I think Terrace has a lot of raw ability, but I also would push back on Dan. If I was in the media availability, the only thing I would ask Dan Hurley, if I was on that floor when he does this every Tuesday, is to say, I totally understand where you're coming from, Coach, but I would love to know, specifically what you're seeing that Terrace isn't doing that is not allowing him to kind of have more minutes. Because like you said, from a fan perspective, what we're seeing is him getting extra offensive rebounds. We're seeing him clear space. We're seeing him not be as foul happy. We're seeing him finish at the rim, albeit not all the time, because you want him to finish some of these and ones. We're also seeing him be more of a post presence when available. And all of those things aren't something that Samson is proficient in. So that's what I would want to know is if you're seeing things that he's not doing from a coach's standpoint, what are we not seeing? That would be the question, right? So despite all that, look, UConn and Baylor, they're two of the most efficient offenses in the country, both ranked in the top 10 in offensive efficiency, but their defensive vulnerabilities tell a different story. Baylor struggles to defend the three-point line, ranked 331st. So bombs away. Could open up some opportunities for struggling shooters like Aiden Mahaney to shine. We'll see. Hurley stressed the importance of his young players embracing the moment, saying, as we talked about this already, quote, some people are going to have to announce themselves to the college basketball world tonight. They need contributions from across the roster. The Huskies can't rely solely on, Solo and Liam. They need a collective effort. Coach Hurley's mindset is essentially, look, we need to keep getting better. This isn't a must win, although I disagree. Although I agree and disagree. I disagree on must win because it's a must win in the perception of the moment. It's not a must win in terms of worrying about resume, because as he said, we got to put blinders on, turn off the external noise, and just keep getting better. That I totally agree with. So still, there's a sense of urgency among the fans and media. UConn hasn't secured a high major win. Tonight's game is an opportunity to silence a lot of doubts and prove they belong among the top 25, top 15 teams in the country. And Hurley summed it up best. We've got new faces of this program. It's time for them to carry their weight and figure it out. So, look, stopping Baylor means stopping them on both ends of the court. I don't want to see a 99-97 game like we saw in Memphis. I don't want to see this in the high 80s. I think if UConn wins this game, it's going to be in the low 80s, high 70s. If they can keep Baylor in the low 70s, high 60s, I think they'll win this game. They should win this game. People are getting on me because I picked them to win all the Maui games. So did everybody else, except for Memphis fans and except for, Dayton fans and stuff like that. So my biggest thing is it's not about predictions. It's about you're home. You're literally in stores. You have an advantage. Even without Alex Karaban, this should be a home court advantage for you. If I'm wrong, I'll say it. I don't think it's a huge drop off from Alex Karaban to Jalen Stewart. I think Jalen Stewart has proven that he is up for the challenge. I think he's going to have a big game tonight. But again, watch for my boy, Ahmad Noel. Ahmad Noel could be the absolute key to this season as he progresses. And him and Terrace Reed, I love them together. I love Ahmad Noel, just his ability to find people quickly. On the break, the little drop-off pass to Liam McNeely that ended up being a layup. He's got a little bit of juice. I think he's ready to rock. Wouldn't even mind seeing some Isaiah Abraham tonight. He looked good in every time Isaiah Abraham has come in the game. He's hit a three, and he's gotten after it defensively. I think he had 5 points in 2 seconds in the game against Maryland Shores. But he's another guy that's 6'7", 6'8", that can absolutely fly. And I'd love to see him get some extended minutes tonight. But let's see. We'll find out. When we come back, let's talk about, is the Big East back? And is the ACC really dead? I think one of those is 100% true. After this. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place the live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more in the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. We've talked about how Baylor is a must-win. We've talked a little bit about how do we fill the void of Alex Karaban. And now we're going to pivot a little bit away from UConn, but we're going to do a little bit of UConn adjacent. Look, these Big East, Big 12 battle and the ACC, SEC challenge, these are early non-season conference matchups, and they're great for TV, and they're a great litmus test for which power conferences stack up. And so far, the results are incredibly telling. Sometimes I feel like some of this stuff is overblown, but the Big East has come out swinging. They had two pretty tough matchups, albeit both at home. So take it with a grain of salt. Our friends in Providence beat the BYU team. Friars picked up a gritty win, holding BYU to just 30% shooting from three-point range, which is obviously their forte. Bryce Hopkins was the star of the night, tallying a double-double with 22 points and 11 rebounds. Good to see him back. I am always a fan of guys coming off of injury, dominating and coming back, but they shot the lights out of the ball. Home game. Abdur Rahim was really good. Our boy Corey Floyd was good there. I think PC, now that Bryce is back, is going to be not a force, but they're a team to watch. I think this team is going to be pretty damn good, and it was a nice win for the Big East Conference. And then the second one was honestly a shocker. Villanova won against Cincinnati. Let me check this box score, because the notes I have are a little convoluted here. But let's see this. I'm going to pause for a second here, guys. Yeah, so my old buddy Wes Miller and his Cincinnati Bearcats lost to a Villanova team that a lot of people had written off, including myself, but they look good. I mean, Eric Dixon had 32 points. He was fantastic. I will say to one of Cincinnati's their best player, Dan Skillins, was out tonight. I have no idea what was wrong with him, but it wasn't great on the offensive side for the Bearcats. It was a lot of dribble drive, waiting for Jizzle James or Day to essentially do something. I can't think of the 3-point shooter that they had. I'll look up his name right now. God, it's a rough name to pronounce, but if I see it, I'll probably say it the right way. Where is he? Cincinnati. Anyway, look, the Bearcats are a top 15 team in the country coming in. People really like them. I think they have a lot of talent. I saw a comment that West doesn't do a good job in high-profile games. I beg to differ on that. I think he's acquitted himself nicely in the college basketball world as a young coach. But I will say this was a bad loss for them, especially with where the program is headed. But good for Villanova. And it's Simas Lukosius is the guy he was shooting like 58% from three or something like that. Yeah, they had a rough night. Shot 30% from three. I think they were shooting in the 40s earlier. But some guys that stepped up for Villanova that we should kind of give some props to is Eric Dixon, Wooga Poplar, Jameer Brickus, I thought was fantastic last night. Tyler Perkins off the bench gave them a nice lift. So who knows, man? Maybe Villanova's back. They're 5-4. They're 5-1 at home. So nice to be home. Let's put it that way. I say that all the time. And then if we, so obviously the Big East, we'll see what happens the rest of the way in this Big East, Big 12 battle. But man, ACC, good Lord, 1-9 against the SEC. Yes, you heard that right, 1-9. But here's the quick rundown. Let's forget about the some of these were not close. Georgia beat Notre Dame by 19 points, 69-48. South Carolina crushes Boston College, 73-51. Arkansas, Miami was close. They won by 3, Arkansas did, with an all-new team. It's just like, although I'm kind of getting tired of Coach Cal being like, hey, guys, we don't practice. Blah, blah, blah. Have you seen those? Those are the best press conferences. Syracuse, destroyed by Tennessee, 96-70. Missouri and California were a closer game. Missouri won 98-93. Texas A&M, good Lord. What a rock fight. 57-44 with Wake Forest and my buddy Steve Forbes. Good God, Wake Forest. Buzz Peterson over there. Good win for him. I'm probably saying his name wrong. I feel like I'm confounding two different Buzzes, but you know who I'm talking about. Coach from Texas A&M that sweats through his suits. That's a good win for him. I think they're like top 20 in the country. Ole Miss destroying Louisville. Part of that, I guess, is Louisville's has some injury concerns, but come on, guys. Oklahoma destroying Georgia Tech, 76-61. LSU beating Florida State by 10. And then the granddaddy of them all. Kentucky's going to win, right? Make it. Oh, no, they were almost 10-0. And I don't know if you saw this, but Mark Pope, who I think has really kind of brought some balance to this Kentucky, were, the best thing since sliced bread, kind of said some weird stuff last night. And I get it. Look, coaches, coming from a guy who has defended Dan Hurley for 3 or 4 straight days, I get it. Some coaches are outlandish, but Mark Pope, who's just kind of the ho-hum guy, was just like, we get it. This is everybody's Super Bowl when we play Kentucky, and that's what makes us so special. It's like, dude, you've been here for like a week. I know you played here. I know you won a national championship under Rick Pitino as a player, but Kentucky's not anyone's Super Bowl anymore. This isn't 1956. This isn't the 70s or the 80s. Clemson has good teams. Clemson was in the Elite Eight last year. You guys weren't. So they were one step away from the Final Four and probably could have won that game against Alabama. And also, Brad Brownell is a much better coach right now, head-to-head against Mark Pope. These are just facts. It's nothing against Mark Pope. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be great. They're ranked 4th in the country. They're going to drop now, but not that much. They'll probably stay in the top 10. But overall, the SEC dominating the ACC. Good God, man. I think what this all means is we don't know anything yet because the Big East has absolutely been dog water lately. And so has the ACC for that matter. But for some reason, the ACC still gets a little more respect, even though it's typically right now Duke, North Carolina, maybe Clemson. And, I know Wake Forest got boat race, but, I think Wake has got some talent too. So, it's a very top heavy league. So I think some of this is compare and contrast which is better right now. Obviously, the Big East is in much better shape, I think, than the ACC is right now. But we'll find out, man. This could totally flip. Obviously, I hope UConn's not a casualty of a Big 12 team tonight. But if the Big East dominates the Big 12 tonight, the narrative will start to flip a little bit, and hopefully UConn can start that parade today at 6:30 and soars. If you're going, wear white. Make sure you're supporting our boys. Look, guys, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in. Make sure you're staying connected with us. Make sure you're staying connected with this team, supporting them any way you can. Support Husky Ticket Project if you can. As always, go Huskies.